morning. I'm Mary Jo Starmer, and today I'm happy to represent the Adult Education and Spiritual Formation Committee as host for today's session, which is the second in a series entitled Elections in the Time of a Pandemic. Can we talk? So, by way of introduction to this series, for those of you who might not have tuned in last week, you know, there was a time when it was just out of the question to talk about religion and politics. It was impolite to ask where someone stood in regards to their political persuasion. And many of us have had experiences in the past that reinforced and ingrained in us the idea that religion and politics, you know, were really off the table. But in today's climate, with the pervasive influence of cable news and social media, we can't help but be acutely aware of the dissension around politics and the presidential election. And I think we can all say it's been increasingly difficult to know how to talk to those with differing viewpoints, with dignity, respect, and honesty. And it would seem that no community is in a better position to find ways of bringing people together than the church. So with that goal in mind, the Adult Education and Spiritual Formation Committee decided to reach out to different experts in their fields to ask for their wisdom and guidance on how to navigate this precarious terrain while we're contending with numerous pandemics, not just COVID-19, but the pandemics of racism, violence, and natural disasters. Last week, we heard from Bowie Sewell, and today I'm so pleased to introduce the Reverend Amanda Henderson to you. Amanda spoke to us last fall, if you remember. Amanda has served as the executive director of the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado since 2014. The IAC was founded for the purpose of bringing people together from multiple religious traditions for the work of educating and advocating for human rights and equality. Reverend Henderson is an ordained minister in the Disciples of Christ Christian Church. She's a frequent speaker and writer on topics of interfaith understanding, advocacy, and civic engagement. And she has a new book that came out last May, which was in its birthing stages last fall when she first spoke to us, called Holy Chaos, Creating Connections in Divisive Times. Amanda, we're so glad to have you with us today.
I'm so grateful to be here.
Well, tell us a little about your book and why you wrote it. We want to hear about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm grateful to be with everyone again. I wish that we could be there in person and with handshakes and hugs and all of the human connection that means so much. And I am simultaneously really grateful for technology and the ways that we can stay connected, and often in ways that feel deeply connected, even in the midst of all of this. So grateful. So yes, I was with you all last year, and at that point I had written this book, and it was actually with the editors, and so it was scheduled to come out in May, but it actually wound up coming out in July. It came out on ebook in May and then was pushed to July because of the pandemic, because it was at the print house when everything closed down, and including print houses. So it got bumped a little bit. And during that time I said, can I get a couple new lines into the introduction, because the whole world has just changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that so many of us felt that in March, similar to past moments in the history of the United States and I imagine the world, where there's this on this day, mm-hmm. or during this time, everything changed. And all of a sudden creating connection looked a lot different. And a lot of my stories in this book are human connection stories, and showing up and moving into new spaces and confronting fear. And so then there was this new reality of we have new crises facing us, and we can't address those in the same ways that we typically did in terms of coming together to grieve.
Mhm.
coming together to protest, coming together to speak out, and so everything kind of shifted. At the same time, it felt really relevant.
Yeah.
And there's a chapter in the book called "I Can't Breathe," and that was around the killing of Eric Garner in New York in 2014, and my first experience of a protest, which was after that murder, and we were at the Colorado State Capitol at 7:30 in the morning, and the Capitol was closed down because of us, about 50 folks, many of us clergy, at 7:30 in the morning who were deemed a threat. And so, there's stories about my experiences of these kinds of things in the book. So back to your question of what is the book, where was it born? It was born in my own work and experiences of trying to navigate what feels like such a chaotic and disconnected world, so often religiously, politically, personally, and finding that space to root down into, for me, my connection to the teachings of Christianity, to the different scriptures and wisdom traditions that I will learn from and call upon, and from my own foundations and how I was raised and how I discerned how to look back on why I believe what I believe and how I want to move into the world. And then finding curiosity and navigating fear and continually showing up and messing up and showing up again. And in my work with Interfaith Alliance, one of the experiences I have is I feel like more people need to take that time to think about what they believe and why and how they want to move in the world. And now it's more critical than ever in a time when it feels like so often we move in sound bites. And we live in sound bites, and taking the time to step back and think and be intentional in the ways that we move into relationships, and then the ways that we live in politics and how we define those things is really important right now. So that's where the book was born, is really hoping to inspire folks to take the time to think, to listen, and to move into new spaces in order to find that deeper sense of connection to God, to ourselves, and to one another, personally and politically.
So really rooting down into our foundations before moving out, just not just grasping or jumping and reacting.
Yes.
But really rooting down first in what we believe. Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's a constant struggle, and it's not a one-time thing. Right. I love roots metaphors because roots are so beautiful and dynamic and constantly moving and growing, and they aren't stagnant. And they grow towards life and connection. And if they aren't receiving that, then they will shrivel up. Or if they aren't serving the life of the plant, we can trim the roots. We can also move a plant from one pot or one location to another if that location is not serving it well. I've had plants that get root bound, and you have to yank that plant out. If anybody's had one where you can get such a root bounded plant, think about that with ourselves, that there are times when we are so constrained and we need to move into a new space. And we have to take the time to think about that and continue the long haul work of rooting so that we can move into the complicated and messy spaces of life more resilient.
So it would seem like the pandemic has really given us that opportunity to do that, right?
That's true. Yeah, not something we would ever wish for, right? But
right.
I think it has, and it also, that has required a lot of patience. I think that one of the other things I love about root metaphors is it takes a long time to really grow a dynamic root system. And in this moment of the pandemic, I know with our work together at Interfaith Alliance in those early days, we did a lot of, if you just need to take some rest, do it. The work will be there tomorrow. Be patient with ourselves. A lot of us are like right here, right now. I think that the heaviness of the world is taking a toll on each of us. I mean, we see that with mental health and relationships, and I've done a lot of conflict navigation in the different projects and advocacy circles that I'm in, because everyone is like, their patience level is right here, and their tolerance for chaos and uncertainty is maxed. And so this is a time to step back and reflect, and a time to really hold ourselves and others with grace, while also being resilient and keep on moving forward. We are also in a really important political time. And as you named, all of these crises that we're facing, we need to be in these spaces rooted and ready to show up.
Any tips on how to know when we're feeling rooted and ready to step out? Or how do you advise the groups of people that you talk with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's a constant dynamic process of discernment and can change from moment to moment. So that's not very helpful. I'm obviously not a black and white thinker and either or on these things, but I think it's a process of listening and patience. I have a couple different diagrams and things in the book because I'm kind of nerdy like that. And actually, I have one right here. So things like discerning fear, or discerning, in the same kind of model could be applied to discerning, am I in a place where it's healthy for me to move out into this conversation or into advocacy? And if not, what do I need to do to prepare myself? Okay. And so the little diagram on fear, if people have the book, it's on page 59. And here's the book, by the way. I'll do my shameless plug. You can get on Amazon, or Chalice Press is the publisher, but it's available anywhere that you can get books. But taking time to ask the questions, and in this reflection on fear, the first question I ask is, what are my hopes and goals? So if I'm approaching a situation that I'm feeling fear in my body, what do I hope to get out of this? What is the best possible outcome? What's the worst possible outcome? So let's even talk about stepping into a difficult conversation with one of our family members about the election who has a different political opinion than us.
Yes.
Perfect. Go straight there.
Yeah, that's what we really want.
And these are really fear-inducing situations. And so if we can reflect on that, what are my hopes and goals? One, I wish that my family would think and see the world the same way I do. That probably might not happen. So another goal could be, I hope that we can maintain a relationship while also being honest with each other about our perspective. And I do hope that they come to see, especially if something for me has real implications and impacts on other people's lives. So I hope that they will come to see that their view on this immigration policy is hurting people at the border and throughout our country. What is the best possible outcome? They could come to agree with me, of course, because I'm right. Or we could have a dynamic conversation, and we could each be changed a little bit from it. I could come to see a little bit more of their viewpoint or concerns, and they could come to see a little bit more of mine. What's the worst possible outcome? And I think this is really important to ask. If I step into this conversation, our relationship could be forever damaged. It could impact the way that my family members are able to interact with my children, which is something that I really deeply value, even if we see the world differently. They could, cut us off, or, you could have all of these, it could get angry or aggressive. These are fears. Who benefits from my fear or inaction in this moment? And I think this is a really important question, because one of the phrases that we hear right now is white silence is white violence. And oftentimes we think my non-action doesn't really have an impact. But the truth is that our non-action benefits the status quo. And so that needs to be a part of navigating decisions about what we step into and what we don't. So my relationship with my family might be cut off. And at the same time, if I don't speak out on this, then nothing is challenging. Let's stick with immigration policy. The ways that, the deaths at the border, yesterday the numbers just came out and they're the highest they've ever been in 15 years. So by my silence, I'm continuing, that's who benefits, is nobody's challenging the status quo. Who suffers from my inaction? So similar line. What are the risks in possible responses? If I step into this space of fear, that I feel scared, nervous, will more good be possible, or will more harm be caused? And this isn't an easy answer, even in the situation of, let's say having this conversation about immigration with my family member. Will that make a difference? Maybe. And maybe the damage that would be done in that situation actually wouldn't, the pros and cons might not weigh out. It also might, like me having integrity to what I believe, also could feed my ability to keep doing this work and to step out. I might not change my family member, but it does make me feel more empowered to go down to the Capitol to speak out, or to call my legislator, or to vote differently. So there's, this is complicated. And then I go on with, kind of play that out. I decide that I'm in real danger, that this isn't worth it. And I'm not going to have the conversation. It's not going to be helpful. And so I stay calm. I stand in the space. I make the decision. It's not worth it in this moment to engage in this conversation. And then I move out of it. And then later I reflect back. Okay. What could I have done differently? Was my fear grounded in real threats? Or maybe not. What was the worst that could have happened? What did happen? And what would I do or say differently next time? How can I push myself further next time? How can I step in healthy ways? And on the other side, I decide to go into the conversation. And, we can play this out. I decide, yes, it's worth the risk. We go through the same kind of series. And afterwards reflect back, was that worth it? How did that change me? How did that change that person? How did it shift? How does that ripple impact other spaces that I move in? So that's just one little logical thinking diagram around these things. And I think that part of this work and knowing yourself, just like so many other things, it's practice, right? And the more we practice stepping into spaces that make us feel uneasy or fearful, and the more we learn, and we learn how to step back, strengthen our roots to be able to step into those spaces again. And we get more and more brave. We also learn how to, every time I have a conversation with someone, I walk away and say, God, I wish I would have said this. or I'll play it in my head of, gosh, you know, my sister and I love my sister dearly, and we have very different views on reproductive rights. And so we've had some conversations, and afterwards I think, gosh, I wish, you know, I could communicate this to her. So next time I know how to do that better. It's practice. And also knowing yourself and knowing, you know, I'm not in a good place right now. My patience level is right here. There is a high likelihood that this conversation is not going to go well. So this is not the moment to step into that conversation. I think I start the book with a story after the 2016 election, the morning after. And my parents voted for Trump and I did not. And I was very upset and couldn't understand why they supported Trump. And we had had some conversations enough that I knew that it wasn't really going to go anywhere. At the same time, my dad had surgery that next morning, and he'd been fighting cancer in the whole lead up to the election. And so I texted my mom that morning and said, I'm just not ready to talk about it this morning. I really want to focus on Dad. I don't want to think about the election. I'm hurting. Family people I know are hurting, and we can talk about this later. And she was 100% respectful, got it. She also didn't want to talk about it. She knew. And so, you know, there are moments when we decide this is where my time and energy needs to go.
And like you said, it really takes that self-awareness, you know, and taking that time to check in with ourselves and know, you know, this isn't a good time. It sounds like there's a lot of grace too for realizing, okay, I wasn't ready to tackle this conversation in this situation, but I can think about it, and next time, you know, try something different. The practice part. Have you worked with groups where you maybe give them a homework assignment to practice it and come back and process it and talk about it? Because it seems like that would be something that would help me, I know, kind of figure out or get a little bit more empowered for the next time it was appropriate to do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so not formally in congregations, but in life, I do actually a lot. And not that congregations aren't life, but I just mean my personal life. I was going to mention that having a good friend to process these kinds of things with, or a small group or community. And I think that that's one of, you know, people talk about caucusing, and when you do racial equity and racial justice work, we'll do caucusing with people who are in white community and Black community to be able to process their own experience, and then to be able to learn and step into that spaces, or to bounce an idea off of. So that's very much, I think, an important part of the practice is community, to be able to learn and grow and reflect with. My running partner is my number one. We will, and she has some family members. And so we'll talk about, okay, how are we going to step in this space, or how do we step into this space in our work life? What worked, what didn't work. Also just that venting. You know, I think that that's another real piece that's important in this, is the feelings are real and visceral in this political moment. And rather than running from those or pretending that they don't exist, having real space to express our fear or rage or frustration or heartbreak, and in spaces that are safe. And you'll accept my patience level that's here, and that I might not be at myself in this moment, and you're going to love me anyway. Those communities are really important right now for building resilience, to be able to keep plugging through these times, because obviously we hear it again and again. This is unprecedented and not like anything so many have experienced before. I say that, and I have to say one other thing, because yes, and one of the things that brings me the most resilience and helps like keep me in check is realizing that people for centuries have had hardship, have had political leaders who they felt weren't with them, or who were corrupt, or, you know, you're getting all of my own political opinions, but that's what this is about. So, you know, people have forever, and I especially think about, you know, Black women during the time of slavery, everything was against them. Mm. Every systemic, every interpersonal, every political, and yet people found the will and the resources, like reading some of like Zora Neale Hurston or Alice Walker, some of the womanist writings, is another thing that really helps with resilience, to be able to keep that perspective in check of, as much as this is and this feels a lot, also we aren't alone in that. People have experienced these kinds of things before and survived to tell.
Seems like that would be part of the rooting again, kind of going back to our foundations and reminding ourselves of those who've gone before us and those who've struggled and persisted, and, you know, so many battles have been, it's just been a step at a time, you know. It's hard to take the long view sometimes. Yeah.
Sure.
So any tips for just how, you know, with there not even being agreement about the facts or what's truth and what's not true, any tips there when talking with people where, you know, you just can't even agree on
basic facts?
Yeah, basic facts or truth. Is it worth it, you know, to have conversations, or is it just, okay, I'm just going to go do what I can do because this is obviously not going to change any. What do you
Right. That's a great question. I wish I had like some easy, perfect answer to that one.
I expect you to, but.
And I think that it's one of the hardest things that we're facing right now, is that we don't have a common trusted upon narrative or truth or story. And I'm also someone who holds diversity and pluralism. Like you don't have to see the world exactly the same way to be in relationship with one another. But the fact that we have really lost like any grounding of being able to rely upon shared facts and understanding. So 2 ways that I have found, I'm not saying they're perfect, because we know that our stories are actually more powerful in moving people, and human relationship is more powerful at moving people than statistics or facts. And not that those statistics and facts don't matter. So I think that you could sandwich something when talking about it. Like, let's talk about the most recent, the ballot and the election fraud. So saying something like, you know, that's not my experience in Colorado, and sandwiching with the Colorado facts are that abuse of the system is less than 1%, that it's really fragment where that happens over the years. And my experience of voting in Colorado is that my ballot comes to my box, I sit down with my family and my kids, and we fill it out at our table, and then we drive it to the drop box and we drop it off. And we can look online and make sure that our vote was counted and recorded. And so that combines a statistic with your own personal story. Okay. And the more that we can tap into our personal stories while also holding truth and facts and put those side by side, because I hear so often like, oh, well, that's your experience. My experience is, there's real, and honestly, as more progressive minded folks, we've used that a lot, honoring people's individual experience. At the same time, we risk moving into like a complete relativism and having no actual facts or truths. And so holding the two together, that we have facts and collective experience as well as our individual story.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great example. Well, tell me how you decided on the title Holy Chaos. What makes the chaos holy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I struggled. So it's actually been a phrase that I've liked for a long time. And part of it is because of just my personality. I have dogs and chickens and kids, and like, I appreciate a lot of life happening around, and I like having a lot on my plate, and it can feel a little bit chaotic. And then there's these moments where it's just like, and it feels so holy in the midst of the life that's moving around. And so that for me is, I've just always appreciated this phrase. I joke that it was my fantasy football team when our family fantasy football league, like 5 years ago. And ever since, it's kind of been my phrase. I won that year of fantasy football. So, and then I'm out. I haven't played since. Go out on top. But I struggled as well with the phrase because the word chaos has been used a lot with Donald Trump, and about like intentionally stirring chaos in order to divide people. And so while I struggle with that way of understanding chaos, chaos as a tool of division, I think that at the same time, chaos is a part of our holy scriptures, and chaos stirred over the waters in Genesis and birthed life. And so there is this beauty in the midst of the chaos of our life. And we also have to use our own discernment and wisdom to know when that chaos is moving us toward holiness and connection, and when that chaos is being used as a tool to divide us. And that again points to that necessary discernment and thoughtfulness and wisdom, rather than, clear, easy, black and white answers. But for me, that's where I experience God.
In the creativity that can come out of the chaos.
Yeah.
And the new. My dog is right here too, so.
My doorbell just rang. So speaking of holy chaos.
Yeah, you need to get it.
No, I'm good. I'm sure it's fine. But the creativity, and the other piece of it is that stepping into complicated or new spaces always feels a little chaotic.
Yeah.
And so in order to tap into our curiosity and willingness to step out and show up and mess up and rebuild, it's always going to feel chaotic. And too often, I think that we fear chaos, or we fear conflict. And that's one of the reasons why we've avoided the topics of religion and politics so publicly, and we avoid the topic of politics in church, and because it makes us feel unsettled and concerned that chaos could break out at any moment. and that it moves us out of our clear lanes and into this more complicated space. And we have to move into those spaces, and staying in our silos is a part of division and dividing us from one another. So.
Yeah, I love how this ties into our theme for the year, that Montview has said is a year of wonder. We're calling this a year of wonder. But Clover explained in her sermon last week how wonder, it isn't just you know, a sense of awe, but it also is the curiosity piece. Like, I'm wondering about that, or, you know, I wonder how this can be true, or I wonder how that happens. And so you're really reframing the idea of chaos into a positive thing and a hopeful, hopeful experience, rather than the doom and gloom where it can just, you know, we can be afraid that things are going to be so chaotic, they're going to spin out of control, and we're all going to just splinter apart. And I guess that is a possibility, but
right now it feels like a really real possibility.
Yeah.
That's I love that. And there's a chapter called Curiosity, and I build on one of the things that Parker Palmer says, that when the going gets tough, turn to wonder.
Oh, wow.
Rather, like, I wonder why we're so concerned about things splintering off right now. I wonder why someone could watch this situation and see it so differently than I do. I wonder why some people feel so uncomfortable wearing a mask, you know, and it moves us into a different part of our brain than the space of judgment or assumption. And actually, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating about curiosity and wonder is they have done brain research and shown that it actually, your brain neurons fire in a different way when you're in a state of mind embracing curiosity and wonder compared to judgment or fear. And that one of the ways to move people out of their entrenched political positions is to invite wonder. And people also who wonder more or, you know, use that part of their thinking are more open to, even if they come in with a view, they're more open to learning and gathering more information. But there's actual brain science behind it too that's very interesting to me. And so, you know, as we think about bridging our political divides, how do we step into spaces and ask someone, I wonder, you know, what's your experience of that? I know we were watching the debate the other night, and my husband has a friend who he really respects, who has different views than him. And he said, I wonder how he viewed this. And so he texted him, and they had a conversation, and he asked him, like, what did you think of that? How did that sit for you? What, you know, and we might not get to, you know, total agreement, but we're staying connected in some way by using wonder as a space to at least see the other person and see one another as we try and move toward, for me, more collective liberation and assuring the humanity of every person. That's always held on to for me. I might wonder how you could view things this way legitimately. And I think some people think that if you engage in those kinds of conversations or engage in wonder about somebody else's view, that somehow you're watering down what you think or who you are or your rootedness, or you're going to fall into, you know, annihilation or relativism. And that's just not my experience. It's actually through being rooted and stepping into spaces that challenge what you think or how you see things, that my rooting becomes more dynamic rather than it killing your, you know, what you stand for.
I'm sure if we were live, there'd be so many questions that people would want to be asking. Is there anything else about your book, anything else about your book that you'd like to share with us and like us to know about that really pertains to all of this?
I think two things, and toward the end of the book, I really talk about two things. one is the need for community, and
Mm-hmm.
my experiences, and I mentioned this a little bit ago, of I'm a deep believer that none of us is alone.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the moments when we feel alone, none of us is alone. And the more we can reach out and pull in and rely upon and be vulnerable with our community, the more we can show up for one another and muddle through this stuff together, the better off we are. And that's one of the things I love about church communities, is you have a space to be able to muddle through together, to grieve together, to celebrate together, to wonder together, to vent and express frustration together in a place where you're safe and accepted for who you are. And so really calling upon our communities in this time.
Mm-hmm.
The other last piece is that this is long haul work. And I'm probably saying that mostly for my generation and younger, that sometimes think that change comes like this, and once we've got it, that's it. And I think historically, we have to just constantly remember and develop deep patience. That isn't, I'm just going to forget it, patience, but patience to keep stepping in and to keep showing up. Rest when you need to and show up again. Because, you know, even as we look ahead at our current political climate, a lot of people are really nervous about this election, justifiably, right? And I want to think that after the election, things are magically going to be better, no matter, like, that's just not true. And so we need to be building resilience for the long haul and building vision for the long haul of how we want our communities to be and what we are willing to do to help make that a reality. And that's not a one-time thing, it's long haul. Now we have each other, and this is one of I love, and our team at Interfaith Alliance, we have a strong, like, I need to step back, you step forward. I can see you're tired, you step back, I'll step forward. And so feeling that together, as we know this is long haul work. We know we're in this together. And for our self-care, sometimes we have to step back, breathe, do that reflection, think, rest, exercise, all of that. And then there are other times where we have to show up and be on and trust that, you know, those who need to step back can step back. So long haul and community as we enter into these days that are ahead.
Those are excellent, good words to carry with us. And lastly, just want to ask you, Amanda, is there any particular work that the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado is doing that you especially want us to be aware of? Or
yeah, great question. So yeah, there's a few things. So one is that we have been working for safe outdoor space for folks who are experiencing homelessness right now. Actually, this weekend there is a test locations or a display so that people can get a feel for what this is talking about. We've gotten a lot of pushback on as we try and find a location for 60 tents. There are not enough shelter beds right now. And in the time of a pandemic, moving people around is extremely dangerous. It's always, you know, we are always of the opinion that people should have housing, and that when we don't have enough housing, that we should not be sweeping people from corner to corner around the metro area. And so we've been working to build a safe outdoor space where people would have safety, health check-ins, access to social care workers, the resources that they need. And like I said, we're struggling to find a location. So also, if anyone has any ideas of a location, reach out to us, and a display of kind of so that people can see what it will look like, that it looks different than the encampments that we are used to seeing around downtown, that this is supported by folks in the community. That's actually over at Belong Church, which I think is on 17th. And I can't remember the crossroad right now. I can get that to you so people can go check that out. And the other, we are active toward the election and encouraging everyone to vote. We have a ballot guide coming out to help people be able to navigate the ballot. We're working on a race on the ballot town hall that will be October 22nd, and I'll get you the information and details on that. It'll be, of course, Zoom conversation about the ways that the different ballot measures, that we can view the different ballot measures through a racial equity lens. And so those are a few things. We're really active on the No on 115 campaign, working to assure that there is not another abortion ban, that abortion is not banned in Colorado. This is the 4th attempt on the Colorado ballot. So we've been active on that. And yeah, it's been a full time.
Great, good. Well, I am just so grateful for a chance to converse with you, Amanda. Last chance to parting words or anything else?
I think hang in there. I think we're all feeling it. All of the fatigue over all of the pandemics, as you named, around racial injustice and police violence and concerns over violence in our community, as well as the pandemic and economic struggles that a lot of folks are facing. We're hearing this morning of more layoffs coming to communities. So as we move into these days, breathe, find connection, take time for reflection, and show up and keep showing up with your full self. That's what I've got.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for your work, your great work. And you've given us some great tools to carry forward this month, especially as we face family conversations with the holidays coming up. I mean, either way it goes, we're going to have those difficult conversations. So
yeah. That's the one positive thing about the pandemic. We might not be able to have as many family gatherings if there
be some, got to look at some silver lining, right?
Negative, depending. I mean, we miss our family, so don't get me wrong. And you know, we might not be having those conversations quite as much.
Yeah, good.
Humor, that's the other thing that's really important these days.
Well, blessings to you and to all of our Montview folks. Please do tune in next week. Our Congresswoman Diana DeGette is going to be speaking with us. So we will have that. And again, thank you, Amanda, so much.
Thank you so much.
Great day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.